parents in particular hold a lot of guilt. I mean, we always think that everybody else has it all together. I must be the only family with children who are behaving like this. I must be the only parent who feels or responds like this. And actually you're not, and it's not your fault. And I hope that it's a message. There are obviously tools and support and therapy that we can all grow in. And also there's grace.
Welcome to the Living Wholehearted podcast, where we help you lead with integrity at home, at work, and in the community.
I'm Tara Matson, a licensed marriage and family therapist and executive coach.
And I'm Jeff Matson, an executive coach and organizational development professional.
And together we bring you 2 decades of experience in leader development and trauma-informed therapy. We are so glad you're here to help you become the leader you would follow. Welcome back to the podcast. We're so excited you're here today for this conversation. And it's really not new to any of us to think about how overstimulated we all are. It is a noisy world. Some of us like it. It feels comfortable to be in the noise, and others are overwhelmed by noise and are trying to find a place to calm down. But it's a reality, and it's impacting not only our adults' brains, but it's highly impacting our children's brains. So today we're going to talk about how to calm down the noise and how we can do that for ourselves as parents as well as with our children.
Yeah, today we have author Sarah Boyd of the book Turn Down the Noise, a practical guide to building an emotionally healthy family in a chronically overstimulated world. Sarah's a writer, child and adolescent development expert, and founder of the educational company Resilient Little Hearts. She holds a master's degree in educational psychology and a diploma in the neuroscience of leadership. Oh, we love that. A native Australian, she now lives in California with her husband and 2 children. We're finding her in Australia this morning. It is 4:45 in the morning, or just after that for you. Sarah, welcome to the podcast, and thank you for showing up so early.
Oh, thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I'd do anything to chat with you guys. And I'm in the future. So the joke is, if you want to know anything about the future, apparently I know it.
Yes, that is awesome. It's only noon here in the Pacific Northwest. So
yes,
yeah,
perfect.
Reaching out across the world. I love it. It's so fun. And I just want to listen to you talk the whole time.
Oh, it's so
I
sweet.
love a good Australian accent. It's so good.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about you and your story and how it's impacting the work you're doing today.
Yeah, well, I kind of started my journey I started studying psychology, and I was very interested in kind of the wellness side of psychology more than the unwellness side. And I went into full-time ministry in youth ministry. So I was working with children and adolescents. And then I just really felt this calling to actually upskill. And that's when I decided to enroll in my Master's of Educational Psychology and really just grow in that area so that I could help people. And so I enrolled in it one year full time while working alongside my husband in our other business, which I wouldn't recommend to people. And it was actually on the very last day. Anyone who's done any kind of study like that, you'll know that it's exhausting towards the end, where you're pulling your thesis together and doing that. And it was the very last, I'd woken up early in the morning. It was a Friday morning, and I was sitting and I had everything ready. It was the days where you didn't submit digitally. You had to go into the university. And I was getting everything ready, and I was having a cup of tea, and my phone rang, and it was like 7:00 in the morning. And it was my doctor who had seen on a routine appointment just a few weeks before. And he said, "Sarah, I'm clearing my schedule. You need to come in immediately." And my world started spinning. And I was like, "What do you mean, come in immediately? I don't understand." And then he said the word that turned my world upside down, which was cancer. I was diagnosed with an aggressive form of thyroid cancer. And I spent the next 18 months basically incapacitated, unable to work because of the treatment they needed to do, and really felt like my world was completely turned upside down. I was 27 years old, and I was still in the naivety of that age of thinking nothing bad's ever, we've got our whole lives ahead of us and nothing bad. And I think even though I had a good prognosis with the treatment, it was very confronting for me that out of nowhere, my life is not guaranteed. My mortality is not guaranteed. Like, suffering can come out of nowhere. And that was a huge wrestle for me. And And then by God's blessing, I was declared in remission. And then after the certain amount of time, we were given permission to have children. And we fell pregnant with our first son and had him. And 2 years later, we had our daughter, Georgia. And it was really the combination of all those factors happening at a very clear time, like very close together, that it's transformational becoming a parent. And also going through that I really realized that I can't protect my children from what they're going to go through. They're growing up in a world of suffering. And as much as I would wish I could roll them in cotton wool and make everything better for them, because it's our heart as parents, but I can't. But really what they needed was a soft place to land and a connected relationship and resources and education to know what to do with hard things. And that's really where this work started. That's when I founded my company, Resilient Little Hearts, which is an educational company for parents and professionals just to help children grow in those areas of resilience and emotional health.
Sarah, you're speaking my heart. We have a nonprofit called Courageous Girls with such a similar start. My story started with holding my little Adonai after a full day of clients, and just that moms, daughters, couples, children that I was seeing all day long, and just realizing how much suffering and hard, and then my own story and all of us loving Jesus. But the reality that it is hard, so just looking at her and kind of going, I wanted her, no matter her story, to know who to cling to and how to know how to stay connected to God and to others. And so the birth of Courageous Girls, and then in Living Wholehearted, this is what we're doing, fanning the flame of leaders like you and helping to impact greater communities. So I'm like, everything about, and I'm glad you're still here with us
Our
to
sister.
do this piece. I imagine that you live with a similar kind of way that Jeff does, having almost died himself. He takes every day. He reminds me how much of a gift today is, probably more so than us who haven't faced death in that way. So
it really does change your perspective. And I think it's a gift. For me, it was a gift on the other side of it, not during it. Didn't feel like a gift during it, but on the other side, because it really does reframe how you connect with God. I think it's a great not reestablishment, but it forces you to wrestle with your relationship with God, and that wrestle, out of that comes a closeness and a deeper trust over time, as well as just like what you were saying about just that sense of things are not guaranteed, and it develops that deeper trust, and also that deeper we need to enjoy what we have today and know that it's not promised forever. But I will say, the promise that we have in the next life as well is such a hope.
It is a hope. It changes the way we see in our suffering. But I think the gift that you're bringing in our conversation today is really that resiliency factor and that connection. I heard those two key pieces, which really is rooted, and we understand deeply now, in neuroscience. And so another kindred piece is this getting out in the neuroscience. So we'll go there next.
Okay. All right. So here's a question for the two of you, as both trained clinicians in the space are having this backdrop. So talk about the neuroscience of children's emotions, okay, and why a parent's brain often leads to overreacting in hard parenting moments, right? What can parents do instead? Sarah, the floor is yours here first.
Really, a lot of it comes back to our neuroscience, whether it's our brain's wiring, whether it's our children or us as parents. So in very simplified terms, there are two parts of the brain: the limbic brain, which is our emotions and our kind of unfiltered brain. And then there's our prefrontal cortex, which makes us a healthy human being. It regulates our emotions. It helps us make healthy decisions. It's our decision making. The thing about the prefrontal cortex in childhood is that it's not fully formed. So children, by the time they are 6 or 7 years old, have developed about 90% of their physical brain growth. But the prefrontal cortex doesn't come to foundational maturity until about 12 years old. And that's why young children do not have the neurological ability to control their emotions. If they feel something, they cry. If they are angry, they kick. There's no level of self-regulation there. And slowly, as their brain develops, and hopefully as they're in healthy environments with mature adults who are slowly teaching them, this is how we behave in situations, and this is what we do in situations, this is how we navigate emotions, they're growing that capacity. And then it comes into prefrontal cortex doesn't come into full maturity until mid-20s, which is why our toddlers tantrum, our tweens back talk, our teenagers make decisions that we think, did you even think through the consequences of that? And a lot of that comes back to that neural wiring. And so it's really not about saying, hey, just let at them, let's just give them off the hook. It really is us to come in and be that healthy, mature presence as they're on the way to maturity. But when it comes to parents' emotions, the thing about the prefrontal cortex that sometimes we're not aware is it's a huge suck of energy with glucose and oxygen. So I liken our limbic brain to our sturdy family car. It's the thing that just keeps going, and you can go cross country on it. It doesn't need, you don't have to fill it up all the time. But for the prefrontal cortex to be in top peak condition, it's more like a race car. You can just, those days you go in and you're just like killing it. You've ticked off all your to-do lists. You're just like, I am on fire right now. But
you cooked it according to my girls.
You cooked it. See, I'm not up with the lingo
term. So.
Yeah. So it's like, and it drains that energy quickly, which is why then you have these short bursts. And if you don't have small breaks or rest or all of the practices that I'm sure you two are talking about all the time, you really are not getting it in optimal condition. And so that's why parents, a lot of the time, it's not the only reason, but it's one of the reasons that parents have these overreaction moments, and also that they tend to come at the end of our days where we've used up all this energy, we've held it together, we've been at work all day, we've used all this cognitive brain power. And then we're coming home to tantrums and backtalk and homework and all the things, my perpetual, who's going to make dinner? Because I don't, where's that person? Apparently it's me.
Or the dishes, or the laundry.
All the dishes. Yeah, so a lot of it does come back to that. I mean, I'd love to throw to you, Tara, as well, but it really is it's wrestling with the limitations of our humanity, essentially. And that's a lot of what my work is about in this book, is because as technology has increased and done so many great things, I mean, obviously I'm here able to talk to you. Subconsciously, it's like we think that we need to keep pace with the machines. And it's like we're running all the time and trying to use all this energy. And it really is a wrestle with the limitations that God's made us as being human.
Absolutely. It is well said. I love the car analogy there. And, I often call the upstairs part of the brain, the frontal lobe, the prefrontal lobe, is the adult, the mature part of us, right? And then we have the limbic system that is more raw and primal and with us since we were born all the way till the day we die. And that is more the child brain. And so when we throw a temper tantrum as an adult, it was really well said to say, yeah, we're exhausted of trying to hold it together. And it can only hold for so long. So the picture you just painted and what neuroscience really helps us with is grace, right? It's that sense of going, okay, we're just human beings. And we have it a bit harder today because of the intensity around us and all the noise. It's creating us to hang out in our childlike brains longer. And I think it's really important to remind our listeners and all of us working with littles, 12 and under particularly, but even all the way through the 25-year-old. I'd say that the older kids can answer the question, why did you do that? They're learning how. But when you ask a 3-year-old, why did you throw the toy? They do not know why. And I just laugh because it's an innate question that adults will ask children. They do not know why. They just threw it because they felt something and it just was a reactionary, which is what that limbic system does in our fight, flight, or freeze. So I appreciate the way you painted the picture of the brain.
Well, I love what you pulled out there because grace is really, I hope, the heart and message too behind everything that I'm sharing because parents in particular hold a lot of guilt. I mean, we always think that everybody else has it all together. You know, I must be the only family with children who are behaving like this. I must be the only parent who feels or responds like this. And actually you're not, and it's not your fault. And I hope that it's a message. You know, there are obviously tools and support and therapy that we can all grow in. And also there's grace. And it's that tension I think we hold even as Christians. It's like, yes, you're saved and you are immediately seen as a saint with God. And also, it's a journey of growth and learning how to become and grow into who God's called us to be. And so, hopefully, there's grace within that journey for ourselves as well.
I just, as a non-clinical person, but someone who's trauma-informed, been through a lot of clinical experiences, just love the fact that you all, more and more people are being equipped and speaking and sharing the definitive neuroscience truths really about how that just amplify God's design. You know, it really amplifies and validates God's design for development, and it's so helpful for parents, gosh, to know at the outset what healthy expectations they should have of their kids based on biology, his design, right? And you know, we work with a lot of leaders, Sarah, and their family systems, and you know, when you get high achievers who are just have this in their family system, this sense of we do everything right, we're behaving and performing, and you know, even there's nothing wrong with doing things right or performing for and crossing those lines, but the impact of that when the motive is really just locked into that, and the way in which there are no limits, you know, and that we work really hard to try to help leaders learn to love their limits and help them as parents and help kids to understand that. Because you're describing, we have to have these little breaks. You have to have these little things that it can't be all things for all people, and we're not always recharged as batteries.
Yeah.
we have to do it.
Well, let's talk about the recharge piece here. Because
Mm,
I think in the work that we do both on the counseling and the coaching side, I don't think we're aware in general as humans how overstimulated we really are. And so a lot of what we're trying to do is notice what's happening in your body. Can you identify? So speak to that. What are some of the tools and
mm,
the practices you're bringing to the forefront to help particularly start with parents? Because if we can do it, then we
mm.
can teach our kiddos, right? So,
Yeah,
mm,
absolutely. Yeah. So it's important to know what overstimulation feels like. And it really is that sense of you can feel your temperature rising, you can feel your heart beating faster, you become agitated or irritable, or I sometimes call it grumpy mum. Grumpy mum is here. And then it leads into brain fog. You feel like, I don't know if you've ever had the experience, I have it all the time, where multiple people in my family are talking to me at the same time about different things, and no one is aware that they're talking to me at the same time. So it's like my brain stops working. I think, oh, I can't, hang on a second, everyone just pause. And then a lot of times, if you're not aware of it, it will end in this big emotional outburst or this kind of saying something you wish you hadn't said, or just, I need to get away, and kind of trying to remove yourself from that situation. There's nothing wrong with feeling overstimulated sometimes, but the problem is when we're in it chronically, and then it moves into chronic stress. And so really it is about parents being aware. And I love the piece that you just talked about there, Tara. It's really about that awareness piece of being able to notice. So thinking about ourselves like a volcano, which is a great metaphor for outbursts. Typically, we're not aware of it until we're at a 9 or a 10 out of 10. Like we're either just before eruption or we have already erupted, and we think, oh goodness, you know, I need to get myself together. But a lot of this work comes when becoming aware when you're about a 6 or a 7 out of 10, where you are actually still in control of yourself, but you're finding yourself really agitated. You know, those times where you've asked your child for the 10th time to clean their room and they still haven't, and you still feel in control of your words and your emotions, but you're getting really annoyed. That's the time to intervene. And what you want to do is remove yourself temporarily from the situation. even just for a few minutes, and try to do something that changes your emotional state. So there's so many tools to do that. It could be prayer. It could be silence. It could be walking out in the garden and taking some deep breaths. It could be running your wrists under cold water. It could be talking to someone who makes you laugh. There's so many different strategies you can use, but doing something to try to change your emotional state before you get to that level of eruption. It's mini breaks. It gives your prefrontal cortex the ability to kind of refuel before you go back in and try and talk to your child about their room. When it comes to children, though, a lot of the times what we see, particularly in younger children as tantrums, is actually overstimulation. And so parents get into this feeling like it must be a power struggle. So one of the ways I suggest parents look at it is in a really basic example. If you're going past an ice cream shop and your child says, I want an ice cream, and you say no, and they throw a tantrum, it's like they're crying, they're screaming. And in that situation, I'm not saying we would do this, but in that situation, if you were to say, okay, fine, you can have an ice cream, that behavior stops. That is what I would see as a power play tantrum. That is, the child has behaved in a way to get what they think that they want. But a lot of the time what happens with overstimulation is there's a situation that triggers it. I want an ice cream. No, you can't have one. Tantrum. But then if you were to say, okay, fine, we can get one, that doesn't change. They are still crying and screaming and upset, and it doesn't kind of satisfy that thing. That then is a sign of overstimulation. And we see that we're intuitive with it with very young children. We scoop them in our arms. We say, it's time you've missed your nap. It's time for a nap. But sometimes we're not aware of it when our 7-year-old's doing it or our 12-year-old's doing it, that maybe they need some time to kind of have a little moment and calm down before we talk about it again.
So good. And then, when they're overstimulated, then you added some sugar and, oh goodness, it's going to be a really fun night, right? Really
Probably
important.
the wrong example.
Yeah.
Ice cream.
This was such a gift to be trained in this way prior to having children, because it even changed the way that we saw sleep. Again, even keeping your kiddos out later than what they would be used to, or you're taking them to the grocery store during nap time. We're forgetting about these kind of dynamics, that they really do get overstimulated. So a meltdown is coming. The more trauma a child has experienced, so if they're adopted or your foster care, the quicker this happens, right? They don't have the same amount of room for stimulation. And so we have to go in smaller doses. The healthier the system, the bigger doses we have. But even with some of our diagnoses and, children being over sensory oriented or on the spectrum. So there's a lot of variations here. But in general, I love how you're just bringing awareness to say, start to pay attention to the body. The body's giving signals. And usually even before, maybe a child gets quieter, or maybe they start moving their bodies faster, they start talking more. There's earlier signs that we start to notice. I know that when I'm overstimulated, you can speak to you, Jeff, and what happens for you, but I know I'll start running into walls. Like my body doesn't work very well, and I just get very clumsy. I will drop things. I'm going, okay, it's time for a break, because I will snap, or I will yell or do something that I regret and have to do repair on. But I think the practice that you're calling us to first is just checking in to say it's okay to take breaks, a mommy timeout, just as much as a kid timeout. And also just paying attention to how our bodies are responding. What's yours look like before you're going to blast?
Oh, it comes fast and furious. So it's just, we're talking emotional regulation here. When I get
you're
dysregulated,
at a 5, 6, 7.
Yeah. When that's beginning to happen, I'm usually, I usually think, have I eaten anything here? Have I,
Good.
so blood sugar dropping, and do I need to go and get a drink of water? Do I need to go to the bathroom? Have I been just trying to stay in something and avoid? I mean, we tell leaders all the time, just go to the bathroom. I mean, it's like, which just sounds so funny, but it's amazing what
we try to press through.
Yeah, we try to press through, do it hard. So let's talk about that emotional maturity and emotional regulation, right? So as parents, In your book, you talk about a new way of approaching our growth as parents towards emotional maturity. And, we're talking about our brains and we're talking about the blood leaving and traveling to places and needing to take breaks. Sarah, speak to that a little bit, as to how we can approach and grow in emotional maturity, be examples of emotional regulation to our kids as we help them to do that. But do it without this whole perfectionism kind of like, oh, my kids aren't like
The
that,
white knuckle it.
and we're going to be like this. And, so without guilt, without shame, how do we do that?
So, yeah, it's such a good question because I actually believe that parenthood is one of the greatest invitations for us to grow in our spiritual and emotional maturity. And I'm not saying that everyone accepts that invitation, but it is an invitation because in no other situation in our lives is it 24/7, is it whether we've slept or not, is it just constant no matter what's going on in our lives? And it forces us to dig deep. And also, we just have this such fierce love that God's given us for our children, this protection, this feeling of wanting to do better for them. For so many people, becoming a parent is the trigger for them to go to therapy, to deal with the stuff from their past because they want to give something more to their children. But the truth is, it doesn't happen instantly. It's not like when they place that baby on your chest, you just think, oh, well, I am this mature person who has it together. And parenthood has this way of humbling you that even if you think you're mature and you go into parenthood and you stop sleeping and you stop showering and you stop all these things, you just think, oh, I'm not the person that I thought that I was. So really, emotional maturity is a growth thing because it's a gift when we can give who we are to other people. When we grow in wisdom, we grow in capacity. It is a ministry, I believe. In 1 Corinthians 4, Paul talks about you have many instructors and teachers, but not many fathers, because there's something about that mentoring mother-father element that people need. And so really when we're growing in our emotional maturity, we're creating a more emotionally healthy family. And a lot of that comes, first of all, from learning the basic things that you mentioned before, Tara, of rupture and repair. Because it doesn't matter how kind of mature you think you are, you're going to mess up. I am, you are, we do it all the time. And so just learning that capacity to say, I'm sorry, and learning how to repair with your child or with, family members is a really crucial element of it. But then learning how to grow in maturity. And a lot of that comes down to, first of all, accepting the situation that we're in. So many times we wrestle as parents. We think, this child, I don't connect with them. Or maybe they have different needs and you didn't anticipate it. Maybe they have a diagnosis and it wasn't what you thought parenthood was going to look like. Maybe they are frustrating you in a particular area that's really triggering for you. And a lot of times before we can move to that sense of maturity and growth in that area, it really comes down to acceptance. This is what parenthood is. This is who my child is. What am I going to do now? And we get really, I think, mentioning before, we compare ourselves. We think, well, that family over there, they have perfect children, or that family over there, they're not dealing with this. But I believe God graces us to the lives that we are in, and that as we go to Him, we find that grace. And so as we can find the acceptance in what is the situation in front of me, that's the beginning of the growth into emotional maturity.
I love the acceptance word. One of the things that reminds me I'm constantly saying is like, God was the one who decided you were going to be this child's parent. So he's the one who has all the wisdom, thinking you got the stuff for this. And parenting is parenting that child in the way they should go. So you can't compare that child to that one over there. Even in a family, they all have different wirings. And so the things, the limits and the giftings that we're shepherding for them is God knows for whatever their journey is going to be, we want to help them to learn to care for that. So, anxiety has been one in our family that we've had to shepherd and care for. And so part of our job was to help one of our children, by the time she launches, is to recognize anxiety's her friend. It's going to be with her a long time. How can she be a good friend to that anxiety instead of trying to punch her in the face every time she shows up? And so this
Yeah.
journey is learning like, okay, it's information. So when we keep stumbling over certain things with our own journey as parents, that's what I'm hearing you say, and with kids, it's good information for us to learn and then to lean in and to go, okay, God, this is our journey. This is what we're about. I think that does calm the angst that a lot of parents have, which is, why is this happening? And shame of,
Yes.
I'm bad at this.
Yeah.
Versus, nope, this is
Or
the
or
journey.
that somehow, yeah, I think, or that somehow they think they've caused it, because I love the way you phrased that. We're shepherding her through it, because it's not that you caused it. Outside of the situations of abuse or trauma where it has been caused, a lot of times there's just different temperaments, different vulnerabilities, different challenges, and it's not the parent's fault. And yet we're in this kind of, I think, we're in a culture swing. Maybe 50 years ago, the nature nurture debate was so, hardwired, and it's all nature and there's no nurture. And there was this huge swing. But sometimes I see in culture now, it's almost like all nurture. There's no natural temperament or no natural vulnerability. And that's not true. It's both. And I love the way that you talk about that as shepherding. We meet the child, we meet the teen where they are at with their things. And it's not our fault. We don't need to carry shame about that as parents. But it is our responsibility. What do we need to learn to help shepherd this little heart so that they grow into that maturity and capacity?
Yeah. And healthy parents lean into that. That's where we just say we get the help we need. We ask for it
Yes.
and we get it. And that's a lot of what health is versus perfection or looking a certain way, right? So I love
Yes.
this. Well, let's talk a little bit about the noise and being in a digitally disconnected culture. And there's a lot of good you pointed to in the digital age. But the overstimulation is definitely connected to the medias that and the amount of media that we are taking in as families. And every family's so different, but in general, even families that have good boundaries take in a lot of media. So let's
Yeah.
talk a little bit about is there a healthy kind of general rule around media and overstimulation, and then maybe put in some practical boundaries, Sarah, that we could all kind of practice.
Yeah, so media is just such a hot button topic. Again, it is the guilt topic for parents. I almost never talk about this topic and have people say, well, I feel really good about the media in my home. So I just want to say that it's something that everyone is wrestling with, and it's something that we sometimes get right and sometimes we need to recalibrate. But the thing with media is I outlay a whole kind of way of looking at it in the chapter in the book on media, because the thing that sometimes we're not aware of with media, we think, oh, is this information too sexually or inappropriate for my children? We're thinking about that sort of thing, but we're sometimes not thinking about the actual stimulation. So everything that is in our environment, our brain has to filter. And most of that filtering is happening unconsciously. It's the brain deciding, what do I need to pay attention to? So on my desk in front of me here, it's kind of clean, but I have all my things, but I'm not noticing that most of the time because my brain's like, that's not important. What we're doing here is important. And so when you have this background noise on all the time, you may think, oh, I'm just doing something else while the television's on, or doing something else while the radio and news is on. But your brain is still using energy to decide, is that something I need to pay attention to? If you think about it, if you're cooking in the kitchen and then suddenly the news came on, you think, oh, that is something I need to pay attention to. So that's one thing to think about, is that it is stimulating. Children's brains haven't developed to the point that they can handle the same things that adults can. And that's really, really important. One of the things we're seeing with very young children when they have, and I want to say, again, it's not guilt, it's chronic levels of watching media. When they're 1 and 2, they're watching 6 hours a day on, that sort of stuff. We're seeing quite in the studies developmental delays at 2 and 3 with language and that sort of stuff. So you want to start to think about delaying screens as long as you can. But I also am aware that like lots of parents are in situations where that's not perfect. So if you are, you want to choose really low stimulating media. Things like when they're little, like Winnie the Pooh, or just things that are calming, not YouTube where it's flicking to different things and ads are coming on all the time and there's that sort of stuff. So the main keys with media is to have boundaries. Yeah, and as much as it seems like a simple thing, there are so many families that don't, or they get to a certain age where they're like, oh, they're 12, they're 14, they can just go on it whenever they want, as long as they get good grades. No, we want to have some boundaries in our family that looks different for each person, but there needs to be a time that things go off. And children need to know, I watch this and then I stop. The second thing that I would really encourage parents is having the screens in communal areas. So you don't want to have children alone in bedrooms with TVs or consoles or iPads for multiple different reasons. Just having them in those communal areas helps give them a level of protection, helps you and your family talk about what's coming up. And then slowly as they grow, you can talk about lots of things of what that could look like. But they're the two things I would suggest parents start with, is like having boundaries, having it in communal areas, and just being aware of how stimulating it is all the time. One thing I often encourage parents, and particularly children under 12, is really consider your intake of the news. For some families, they like to have it on 24/7, and that is very stressful for children in a way that sometimes we're not aware of. Children it's not that we can protect them. If they're going through something stressful in their real life, that's really important that we talk about it and we're there for them and we're discussing it. But the news is often not something that's in their day-to-day real life. They don't need to know it at such a young age. So that's something that you could consider could reduce some of the stress on them.
So many good things there that I think parents, again, it's not always the content, it's the process or the way we're going about it. And so, the shows need to be really slow, like almost boring
Yes.
in today's world, right? Everything is so fast paced in the shows. So the examples are, and there are some really good shows out that are but they're very slow and they even talk slower and they have pauses in between. So again, that's for brain development and it's less about the content. And at that age, they're mimicking a lot of content. So you do want to think about content like news.
Yes.
So I appreciate that piece. I mean, even just yesterday, my girls have been hearing this. We talk about this all the time, their entire life. But my 16-year-old was watching a show and working on her laptop at the same time, which is a common teenage thing, which probably most teenagers would then have headphones on listening some music, right? And I just walked in and I said, remember, you're training your brain to be ADHD, attention deficit, like with the multimedia, it's going to overstimulate you. And she was like, oh, yeah, you're right. So I said, just choose one.
Choose one. Choose one.
Choose one.
Choose one.
Not all 5 at the same time.
Yes.
But that kind of brain, talking about brains with our kids, especially the 11, 12, 13, as they're going, why can't I? Why can't I? Again, we're saying we really want you to have a healthy brain. We want you to learn how to be connected to people, not machines. So that kind of language can be really helpful. When they're little, not so much. We're just doing a lot less and regulating those boundaries. So good. Let's end with that, like connection, right? Like one of the things that I found with my clients over the years, and this is very a vulnerable thing to say, but I want to put it in the room here, is that I think a lot of parents go to media because they don't know how to connect with their kids. And they also go to busyness, right? We're going to sign up for every camp and every sports, and we're going to be out of the house every night because if we sit around the dinner table, it feels awkward and I really don't know what to do. So we fill our time and space so that it's limited, kind of eyeball to eyeball with our kiddos. So that if you feel that as you're listening, you're normal. It's kind of a thing and you have to experience connection to give it. So let's talk a little bit about some tools and some thoughts there, Sarah, before we end.
Yeah, I love that you're normalizing it because again, I think many people secretly feel that they are the only ones struggling to connect with their child and everyone else must have this natural thing that happens. And I think for most people, there's at least one child in their family that feels like, I'm having to learn to do this. So in my work, most of what I look at is building resilience and emotional health in children. And the studies show that the number one predictor of a child's resilience and emotional health through childhood and adolescence and into development, into their adulthood, is a connected relationship with a healthy adult. So most of my work focuses on how can we become healthier as adults and how can we connect with our children more. So there's a couple of things that I would suggest just practically. So first of all, remove all the shame. First of all, one of the key ways to connect with a child, and again, you want to be aware of it's their feeling of connection as well as yours. So there may be times that you feel connected, but they don't, or vice versa. But the first kind of principle, I mean, you think about this when you're dating, when you first meet that person that you're kind of interested in, you become interested in what they are interested in. All of a sudden, when you've met that person, you're thinking, I've never been into that sport or that kind of hobby or that. And all of a sudden, I'm doing it all of the time. So I can be around that person. The same is true with children. One of the first things we can do is become really interested in what they are interested in, even if that is things that you maybe are not naturally interested in. Trading cards or Lego builds or the newest thing that's happening, with dolls or whatever it is, skincare, I don't know, all of the things, but just actually showing interest in what is in their world, you're entering their world, is a really core part of connection. The second thing I would really suggest for parents, and this is particularly when you're really struggling with maybe one of the children and you just think, I just don't get them, is finding an activity that you both enjoy and having that as some kind of regular part. For some dads, it could be like there's a specific sport that they love that their child's like, yes. And, you might go to the games together or you might do something together, or maybe it is like baking or a hobby. It doesn't have to be expensive or complicated, but when you feel enjoyment in doing the activity, that level of resistance that you have of like, this is going to be awkward, you're kind of inviting your child into your joy as well. And then the third thing I would just say is if it feels overwhelming and intimidating to you, just start small. Start with small rituals that you have on a daily basis, whether it's we say prayers before bed, we say grace at dinner time. We read a book together before bed. We walk as we chat instead of face to face. So we're both looking in, different directions, and just slowly get comfortable on that level. And then you can grow again. Most of connection comes down to empathy. And that's not empathy in a way of like, well, I should feel sorry for my child, so there's no boundaries. I'm not talking about that and that misunderstanding of empathy. But empathy is like, I'm actually understanding and seeing who you are. And anything that a parent can do to enter the child's world in a way that they're like, oh, I understand you now. That may be reading books if they have a diagnosis or something like that. It may be educating yourself on that or talking to a therapist on that or growing on those things or a coach or anything like that. But just learning and leaning into their world.
It's so good. And it is what our God modeled, right?
Mm.
Coming and leaving the throne of heaven and entering our world and coming into our own human experience. And so it's such a beautiful picture for us parents. And it can be really fun, actually. It's good for us to learn to play and to join and to relax a
Yes.
little and to join them in their worlds. So I love all those very practical places to start for parents when they're thinking, how do I fill the time to connect to my kid?
Right.
Let your child lead. And then, or find a common hobby, which is a great way to start.
Yeah, Sarah. So this has been a wonderful interview. For our audience, what's just something that comes present top of mind that you would say would be just a word of encouragement to them?
Yeah, I would just say when you feel overwhelmed and stressed, or maybe you don't feel like you're nailing this parenting thing, you're not alone. It's a very normal experience and not something to be ashamed of. And also, there is more hope. There is more joy and understanding to be found and growth to be found as you go on that journey. And I think particularly when it comes to overstimulation, like I was saying earlier, most of this work comes with wrestling with our limitations, the fact that God has made us human, and we wish, like you mentioned before with high performers, we wish we weren't. We wish we were limitless, that there was nothing stopping us ever. It's annoying that I have a body, or it's annoying that I have, these limits that need to be helped. But when we learn to live within limits, we actually access more of God's design for our life, and that joy and that sense of peace and that sense of good pacing that happens in our life. So I would just really encourage people, like, what are those limits that you're wrestling with? And giving yourself permission to have more breaks. Mum guilt can go out the door. Sometimes we're giving everyone else breaks but ourselves. But it's actually important, even for you to show up as a great parent, to have those small breaks for yourself, recalibrate, and then you can enter the environment again as a healthy person.
I love it. It reminds me, I was just with a bunch of young leaders. They were sitting around the table and us moms were talking. And I said, you know what I used to do with my girls? I used to have them put me to bed.
Yeah.
Play house. And I was their baby.
Yeah.
And they would have to put me to sleep. And I would fall asleep.
I never heard that before.
And I would
That's
have
hilarious.
my little break while they were, and they would, put the blankets on, and the moms were laughing. They're like, that is brilliant. I'm like, oh yeah, any way to get a rest.
Good one, hon. Good one.
Open and
Brilliant.
play. Yeah, for open and play.
Yes.
Oh, Sarah, so good to have you with us. So Sarah Boyd, Turning Down the Noise, where can we find your book and your resources?
Yeah, so the book is wherever books are sold. You can get it anywhere there. And you can find my resources at Resilient Little Hearts, the website, and on social, or sarahboyd.co.
Yeah, so good to have you with us.
Great to have you, Sarah.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
So good. Well, these resources we'll have them in the show notes. They're fantastic. I'm so excited about the work that Sarah is doing and the partnership with Living Wholehearted and Courageous Girls. This will be a beautiful partnership. But if you need somebody, a coach, a counselor, resources, you can go to livingwholehearted.com. We're here to serve you and to partner with you in your particular story. And so we're grateful that you're joining us with this podcast. Share this with another parent. I think we need more grace and reminders of our limitations and what it means to be human so that we can parent our children with that same message. So hopefully you can be encouraged today, but share this with another mom or dad today. And until then, continue growing in the leader you would follow.